Right. So as I told you, you can install Firebug. Okay. Now I'll tell you how to use it properly. Okay. For example, you're on this page. Let's take a very simple example. Okay. You are on the Gmail page. Okay. And if you use Firebug over here, you can investigate the elements on the page. You can see the page source. Now I told you that every element has a tag name and attributes. For example, this is text field. Okay, this text field, the tag name is input and there are various other attributes. With the combination of this tag name and the attributes, we go forward and identify the elements on the page. Okay, let me do one thing. I'll make an Excel file known as elements. Okay, just be with me. Okay, right, I'll have column names as element name, tag name, every element on the web page has a tag, and mandatory attribute and optional attribute. Okay, right. Hold on, let me go to another page in .rediff.com. Right now, just a minute. Just a minute. Okay. Now, what are the different types of elements on the page? You have input box or text field, to be very simple. You have button. You have checkbox. You have radio button. You have links, which are visible to the human eye. Okay, with which you interact. All right. You have normal text on the page. Then you have got image. Okay, the images which you regularly look onto. Okay, then you have a drop list. Right. I think these are the 8 major elements on the page which are visible to you. Okay. Right. Now each and every element will have a tag name and few mandatory and few optional attributes. Okay, this is always there. Each element will have some mandatory attributes which will always be there, and some optional attributes which might or might not be there. For example, if you take example of a text field, if I use Firebug on the username text field over here, the tag name is input, and these are the various attributes. Out of these attributes, you will always find type equals to text in case of an input box. Okay, for a text field, the tag name is input. All right. For a button, this is the go button. Again, the tag name is input. For a checkbox also, right? This is a checkbox. Keep me signed in. Right. If I look at this checkbox, again the tag name is input. Right. A text field, button, checkbox. Right. They have the same tag name input. Rather, radio button, I also know that radio button is also having the same tag name input. All these 4 elements on the page have the same tag name. Okay. Now, the difference is that in case of a text field, right, if you look at a text field, you will always find this attribute, type equals to text. You will always find it, right? In case of a button, this is the go button, right? Type equals to submit would be the attribute. Okay, it will always be there. In case of a checkbox, type equals to checkbox would be the mandatory attribute. In case of a radio button, type equals to, as the logic says, radio will be there. Okay. All the four elements have the same tag name, but the mandatory attributes they differ. Okay, so if it's an input tag with the type checkbox, it becomes a checkbox. If it is an input tag with the type submit, it becomes a button. Right. In case of a link, okay, if you have a link over here, for example, create new account, a link will always have a tag name A, anchor tag, and it will always have the mandatory attribute href. Please note, in link, a mandatory attribute href will always be there. It will actually point towards the URL which will be opened when you click on the link. All the links on all the web applications will have the anchor tag A, and it will point towards the URL which will open when you click on that anchor tag. Okay, so in case of a link, anchor tag is A, and href is a mandatory attribute which points towards the URL. In case of a text, the visible text on the page, well, you cannot specify a particular tag name to that. Sometimes it might be a div, sometimes span, sometimes para tag. Okay, there can be any tag name. There is no mandatory optional, no attribute. In case of an image, okay, yes, for example, for example, this Rediff Mail Pro is an image. Okay, it's not coming up. Hold on. Yeah, this Rediff.com on the top. Okay, this one. It's an image. The tag name is always img, and there will always be an attribute. There will always be an attribute known as source with an image pointing towards the URL which will open when you click on the image. Okay, when I'm coming over to right, so it is opening a blank page right now, but the source attribute will always be there for an image. Okay, right. For an image, the tag name is img, the mandatory attribute is source. For a text, there is no mandate. You cannot generalize text to any tag or any attribute. You can never generalize a normal visible text on the page. You cannot do that. Okay, you'll have to investigate it on the fly and check it. Drop list. Okay, a select box. Do we have it on this page? Okay, hold on. Just a minute. Just a minute. An HTML drop list. For example, this is a country list. Okay. Always note that a drop list has a tag name known as select. Okay. And there is no mandatory attribute. There is no mandatory attribute in a select tag. The tag name is always select. Alright. Fine. So these are the tag names. You need to understand that most of the times you will be 99% of the times you'll be seeing these tag names: div, span, para tag, image, select, anchor, input. Right. These are the mandatory attributes which will be always there with these tags. And there are few optional attributes like ID, name, and class, which will always be there, or which might be there, or might not be there with these particular elements. If you have an ID or a name of an, I'm not talking about class right now. I'm just talking about ID or name. If you are having ID or name as an attribute with any element, it really becomes easy to identify that element with Selenium. Right. For example, again, going to Gmail page. Okay. Hold on. Right. This is a text field. It's an input tag. Note it's got an attribute known as ID. ID equals to email. If you have an ID or a name associated with an element, it's very easy to identify and work with that element. Right. So over here we had written the code. We were opening Mozilla. If we go to gmail.com, print the title, then I need to enter something inside this text field whose ID is email. Okay. Now if you look at the documentation of Selenium, inside the WebDriver interface, you have a function known as find element. This will find a particular element on a web page. Okay. If I hold on, just a minute. Let me close few programs. Yeah. Right. If I write over here driver dot, I will get the function find element. Find an element on the page by any criteria. By is a class. Okay. By is a class. Right. It actually, the by class, it actually presents you with the locator strategy. Okay. With a strategy to locate the element on the page. Okay, it's got the mechanism to locate the elements by any criteria, right? By the ID, by the link text, by the name, by the tag name, okay, by the XPath, by the CSS selectors. We look at them one by one, don't get confused. Okay, you can find an element by the ID of the element as well. Okay, you can write in your code driver.find element by the ID. Okay, and you give the ID, right? The ID is email. No, there is nothing known as small y. It's only capital B and Y. Okay. So driver.find element by the ID email. This will find the element on Gmail with the ID email. Okay, and hold on, just a minute. WebDriver, yeah. And find element function returns your reference of web element interface. Okay, so you will extract the web element email equals to driver.find element by the attribute by the ID attribute email. You can find the element with various attributes. You can even find it with a tag name. But tag names can be common. Okay, so I'll come over to everything. Okay, just be with me. Right. Now email, if you want to type something, the function is send keys. In the web element, the function is send keys. If you want to type in your email ID. Okay. Right. So when you run this code, dynamically it will open Mozilla. Hold on. It will go to Gmail and it will type in, you see that My email ID has been typed. Okay, right. Now if you look at this, it's also got a name. You can also find the element by a name. For example, the button next. The button next has the ID next and the name is sign in. So you can also write over here web element button equals to driver dot find element by the, there is a strategy known as name. You can find the element with the attribute name. It becomes very easy to find elements if the elements have got ID or name, right? By the name sign in, you get the button, and on the button you want to click, so you write button dot click. Okay, right. This will go to Google, Gmail, enter name and click on the button. I don't want to run this script. I don't want to enter my email ID with automated script on Gmail. Okay. Now the question arises over, a few questions they will arise over here. The first question is, what if there are two elements on the page with the same ID? What if there are two elements on the page with the same ID? What will Selenium do? Look, first of all, if multiple elements on the page have same ID, look, it should never happen that multiple elements on the page should have same ID. You should never do it. You should talk to developer. You should tell them that please give different IDs to different elements on the page. ID is something which is supposed to be unique by default. A name is something which is supposed to be unique by default. An element should, there should be no two elements on the page should have the same ID or name. Okay, you should talk to developer. But still, if it is the case, if the developer is not agreeing or if the developer is not reachable, and if two elements on the page have the same ID or name, what will Selenium do? Look, if you look at the documentation, read the documentation, find element function, it finds the first web element. First. Okay. Now what do you mean by first? Look, for example, if there are two elements on the page, one is over here and one is over here, who have the same ID. Okay. Now when Selenium scans the page, when you write driver.find element by the ID, it scans the page like this, from left to right, and it goes down. So as soon as it finds the first element, which is this one, it will use it. It will not use the second one, which is at the bottom. If you want to use the bottom one, we'll talk about that later on. But right now, understand one point, that if two elements on the page have the same ID, and if you fire driver.find element, the first one would be extracted. The Selenium actually extracts the objects from the top left to the bottom right corner. Okay? Right? Fine. I hope this is okay. Now moving ahead. Moving ahead. Every time you will not find an ID or name of an element. You'll never find it every time. For example, looking at the Gmail page only. If you look at this text over here, one account, all of Google. This is an H1 tag. This has got no ID, no name, nothing. Okay, this is an H1 tag having no ID, no name, nothing. How will you identify this? How will you identify this? Well, it's very simple. Okay, you have to use a different locator strategy. For example, XPath. Now I'm coming over to XPath now. What is an XPath? Technically, XPath is like an address of the element on a web page. Each and every house has a house number, right? That's how you identify. Everybody has a certain address. Everybody has a certain name. That's how you recognize that person. In changing the screens. Okay. Now I was talking about XPaths. XPath is like an element, like as I told you, everybody has a name, right? Then everybody has a unique name. With that name, you recognize that person. Similarly, every element on the web page has a certain XPath. Okay, right. With that particular XPath, you will recognize the element. Okay, right. You can calculate the XPath manually, or there are tools as well which can help you in calculating the XPath. You calculate the XPath from the page source. Okay, you always calculate the XPath from the page source. Right. For example, I'll tell you. Let me open a notepad. Right. Now, we have this h1 tag. Hold on. Yeah. We have this h1 tag which has got no ID or no name. So we will be calculating the XPath of this element to identify it. Okay. Right. There are two types of XPaths. One is complete, or it is also known as absolute, and one is known as partial XPath. Okay. Right. So we will be calculating the complete XPath first. I'll tell you the complete XPath first, and then we'll come over to partial XPaths. Alright. You will be starting from the very root of the document, which is this tag, the HTML tag. The HTML tag is present at the root of the document. Okay. Inside HTML tag, you have got two tags, head and body. You want to go inside the body tag because ultimately the h1 tag is inside the body tag. Okay, inside the body tag you have this division tag. Okay, right. We will be traversing from one parent tag to the child tag till the time we reach the tag h1, which is this tag. Okay, we are interested to reach h1 tag from HTML tag. Okay, right. So the first tag is HTML, inside it body, inside it div. Right. We have reached till this div tag. Okay. Inside this division tag, there are three parallel division tags. Understand that inside this division tag, there are three parallel division tags, and we want to go inside the second one because the h1 tag is actually present inside the second division tag. Okay, so what we'll write over here is that inside the division tag, go inside the div 2. Inside the div 2 there is again one div and then h1 tag. I hope you got my point how I calculated this XPath. Right, so this I manually calculated the complete or absolute XPath. Okay, it starts from the base of the document, that is the HTML tag, and it traverses down till the element. Okay, right. Now this kind of XPath is little dangerous to use. Okay, I hope there is no delay now. I am being very careful. Okay, right. So this type of XPath is a little dangerous to use. The reason being, that it starts from the base of the document. If something changes, okay, if something changes in the application, for example, tomorrow if a new tag is introduced in between, this XPath will go for a toss. Now, if you're using this XPath to identify the element, then you will have to change your code as well. Okay, so you should always write your code and automation in such a way that if something changes in the application, right, there should be minimum impact to your code. And if there is certain impact to your code, it should be easily, you should be able to easily correct it. All right, so I can use this XPath. Okay, hold on. I can go over here to my code and I can write web element heading equals to driver dot find element by the XPath, and I have given the XPath of the h1 tag. Okay, I have given the complete XPath. Right, and I can write heading dot get text. All right, fine. So when I run this code, it goes to Gmail, and if you minimize the browser, you see that it's printed the title first, Gmail, and then it's printed the text. Okay, so you can use this. You can use by the XPath locator and you can use the XPath. But XPath is a little, this kind of XPath, the complete XPath, is little dangerous to use. Okay, so what we do is that we use the partial XPath. Okay, now partial XPath, it can be calculated very easily. Fine.